This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
We got a lot of great stuff left here on the show. Coming up in 15 minutes, Jeff Sherman's going to be with us. The VP of Risk Management is the official title. Odds maker for both golf and the association over at the Westgate Superbook. We'll get his thoughts on an NBA Cup Friday. And speaking of, Zach Cohen will be with us as well. We'll get his thoughts for the weekend and the action tonight. Just have a couple of props, including a player prop that I like in the biggest game of the day and maybe the biggest game of the NBA season so far. Denver will be taking on Houston. Very much looking forward to that later this evening. But we have not, on a Friday, yet gotten to our market power ratings for Week 12 in the NFL season already here. So let's get to it as we look. I teased this at the beginning of the show. We have a new team at the top of the market power ratings. Now, they are not by themselves. They are in a three-way tie. Chiefs, Eagles, and drum roll, please, your new addition to the top of the market power ratings, one of the highest power-rated teams in the National Football League, and now at some spots your favorite to win the Super Bowl. The Los Angeles Rams check in with the Chiefs and the Eagles on that top line in our market power ratings for Week 12. Deservedly, Matthew Stafford playing some incredible football. Not only are they favored to win the Super Bowl, but they are also, their quarterback at least, favored to win most valuable player. Rams, I think, deserve this status at the top of the board for our market power ratings, and it ties into their matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who they will face this weekend. And interestingly enough, while the Rams move up here in our market power ratings, we actually don't see a real change for Tampa Bay's market power rating. Last week, Tampa Bay found itself right on that 80 line, the Buccaneers did, when they were taking on the Buffalo Bills, and yet this week they remained there in that spot for the power ratings at that 80 spot. So where do we go from here? Eagles, Rams, Chiefs, I don't think anybody would really question, outside of Kansas City, who finds itself in a situation where, from a power rating standpoint, it probably deserves to be among some of the best teams in the NFL. I think you can quibble with it being the best team in the NFL or tied with the Eagles and the Rams as being the best team in the NFL. But still, Kansas City is respected by the market. We know that's how this is going to go. So they're probably going to remain there until they take maybe another loss this week against the Indianapolis Colts. You see the number there in terms of where they're at. Kansas City laying that number against Indy. About a 2-point difference between the two teams. Colts have been a pretty steady spot there at 83. Where I wanted to go was actually with the Eagles here on that 85 line. So considered equals with the Chiefs and the Rams according to the betting market. But why this matters is Philly, of course, is taking on the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys here catching about that 3.5, depending on where you look, mostly threes across the board. So that would indicate about a 4.5-point difference between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. Well, let's round it up to 5. It's sitting on a key number. There were some hooks out there earlier. No real move to get that under 2.5. So if that's the case, let's take a gander where we have the Dallas Cowboys because of the Eagles. How about the Cowboys as equals to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the 80 line? Now, I don't think if I were to just walk up to somebody on the street and say, hey, do you think the Buccaneers and the Cowboys are power rated equal to one another? Would you say that they're pretty close to one another? I think a lot of people would probably say yes. I think maybe more would lean toward the Buccaneers being the better squad. But in general, there's not that big of a gap between Tampa Bay and Dallas. Where I find my biggest issue here is where the Cowboys rate in comparison with some of the other teams, and thus maybe them being a little too high here, and by extension then potentially playing the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend once more. Look at where the Cowboys are at on that 80 line. Now look at the next couplet of teams that we're talking about. 2 points better than teams like the Bears, the Jaguars, the Texans, the Vikings. I feel like the Cowboys are equals to those sort of teams. Are they 3 points better on a neutral than the Pittsburgh Steelers? We'll get to Joe Burrow and the Bengals, although Joe Bengal does work. But the whole premise here being is that the Cowboys, yes, they beat up on the Raiders last night. Yes, they have one of the best offenses in the National Football League. But to push them up to this point where they're on the 80 line, a point behind the fully healthy San Francisco 49ers, or at least as healthy as you can be 49ers, it is a really interesting upgrade for Dallas, especially when you consider just a week ago when they were taking on the Las Vegas Raiders, they were floating around that 77 line. So we have seen from last week to this week a near 3-point or about a 3-point upgrade for Dallas on the market power ratings. That to me really does stick out with where we're at. We should also note here, as we were talking about with our guy Jason Jarvis, and we've talked about many times, the status of not only the Tennessee Titans, who find themselves on the 69 line, the worst team in the National Football League, but just like we have a new team at the top, we have a new team at the bottom. Sorry, Shedeur Sanders, your version of the Cleveland Browns are considered, along with the Tennessee Titans, the lowest power-rated team in the National Football League. Browns, of course, taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Right now, this number's up to 4 across the board. That puts you at about 2.5 point difference between the two, rounded up to 3, considering where this Raiders team is at with the number. Again, I like to round up if we're sitting on key numbers with some ease. And when I say by that, it's 3.5 minus 110, 4 minus 110. That's where we're at with the Raiders here. And the Raiders aren't even a highly power-rated team. Remember, last week, they get smoked by Dallas. That was prior to, of course, them getting knocked down here. A week ago, Raiders found themselves on the 74 line. So the Raiders find themselves as about a 3-point difference better than a Browns team, and that's after a market downgrade from a season ago. I think you can make the argument that the Browns maybe shouldn't be that low compared to the Raiders of all teams. This kind of flies with what I've been talking about here for a while, which is the temptation to maybe look at the Browns. I know I bet this game under, as we talked about earlier in the week, but is Shedeur Sanders, with a week of preparation and the ability to practice with the ones, are they really with that defense? Playing indoors against the Raiders squad that defensively, while they don't give up explosives, is not particularly great. Are they really this low on the totem pole, the Cleveland Browns, with Shedeur Sanders as their starting quarterbacks? Let's take a look at the two quarterbacks, by the way, that may or may not be starting for their respective teams. Steelers and Bengals, not much separation between these two teams. Obviously, the Bengals taking on the New England Patriots. Patriots find themselves on the 83 line, if you see there, with the Colts, the Packers, the Ravens, the Seahawks. We'll talk about the Ravens momentarily. Of course, the Patriots, with this number against the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals, because of that differential, will find themselves on the 76 line. Now, the question becomes, and we do have Burrow here, and that's my assumption, is that the market is somewhat tepid in thinking that Burrow is going to potentially start this game. However, since we put these together and news today, it does seem like the Bengals are actually going to be very cautious and maybe not start Burrow this weekend. I'm somewhat surprised by that, with practices under the belt and really no margin for error if you're going to make this push in the AFC North. So you can assume that the Bengals are going to slip down the standings or our market power ratings here to maybe about the 75 or maybe even 74 line by the time we get to kickoff, with the assumption that it is indeed Joe Burrow getting the start. Steelers, on the other hand, are pretty interesting. Again, a situation in which the Chicago Bears is a 2.5 point favorite. Again, 1.5 for home field, so it means about a point difference on a neutral between the two. We're running with 1.5 for home field. That's how I've measured it all season long. I would tell you that maybe the Bears are about a point better than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what we're talking about here, Bears, 2 points behind the Buccaneers and the Cowboys, 3 points behind the 49ers on a neutral. I think that Chicago is probably at the peak of its rating. Interestingly enough, the market hasn't budged too much on where Chicago is. They have been slightly upgraded. But again, a 7-3 team with a negative 6 point differential and getting on the right side of almost every single turnover, that is something that you would think at some point is going to dry up here. But maybe it is this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Either way, Steelers are a very strong teaser leg, as we have discussed, and I've used them here. And I would agree with the thought process as well, that even with this quarterback change potentially, I don't think at this point right now, as much as it might make some angry, I don't know if there's that big of a difference anymore between a Mason Rudolph and an Aaron Rodgers, and the Steelers can still get this done against the Chicago Bears, but it does seem like this is going to be a spot where you can actually do some damage here. The other thing I'd like to point out, as we're looking at where these rankings are breaking down, again, we're starting to see this kind of line of demarcation between these good teams, these middle-tier teams, and then these bad teams. You have your powers that be, if you will, Chiefs, Eagles, Rams at the top of our market power ratings, all the way down through that 83 line. So the Colts, the Packers, the Patriots, the Ravens, the Seahawks, this group of teams that are all within 2 points of each other and generally are Super Bowl contenders. You can see how this kind of sorts itself out. Then you get this 2 point gap, and there's the 49ers, which makes some sense in the sense of like, hey, look, we just don't know what we're doing with this team. Brock Purdy's back. He actually has full practice all week long, so he's probably at his healthiest. By the way, taking on the Panthers, who find themselves down at the 75 line there. But after that, Buccaneers, Cowboys, and another line of about 2 points before you get to the Bears, the Jags, the Texans, the Vikings. We are starting to see, again, these pretty solid, we'll call them like 3 groups of teams in the NFL, with a team like the 49ers with the potential to make their way up in the power ratings, considering how they play and how they'll close out the year. But I think that I don't believe anybody would really quibble with where we're at for some of these groups. But I will say this, as we throw these back up one more time, Minnesota, Green Bay, 6.5 with a total of 41.5 against the Minnesota Vikings. To go back to the question that Stormy has asked many times, we've brought up here this week, a team that plays down to its level of competition, or maybe it is that level of competition. Green Bay has not been a good ATS team. They have constantly kind of, if you will, played with their food. Now, if you believe in that metaphor, that would assume that the Packers are in some position of power to play with your food. But what if they are not this team? What if they have just been too highly rated by the betting market? They haven't really slipped outside of the 83 line all season long, despite failings left and right in terms of outright losses, ties, or just failed covers against certain opponents. And for the Minnesota Vikings, maybe at a low here for the season, sitting right at that 78 line. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Minnesota, but the market has been oddly stubborn with what they want to do with Minnesota, with this team slipping no further than about 77.5, 78 on their power rating. That is a really interesting dynamic because you have two teams that I think you can argue from a perception standpoint, from a market rating standpoint, have been a little overvalued by the betting market, and yet here they are meeting each other. And if I had to take a stab at it and said, hey, which of those sides would you rather back? Who would you rather bet more is more fraudulent, Minnesota or Green Bay? I think I'd have to roll with 9 one more time. But that is not a question I have to answer because guess what? You don't have to bet on every single game. VSiN Pro subscribers, you now have access to our exclusive new AI player prop projections powered by Opta AI, of course, the trusted data source behind elite soccer analytics in the UK. You'll get data-driven projections for quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs, exclusive NBA player prop projections, all compared directly to DraftKings lines to help find your value. Access it all with a VSiN Pro subscription at vsin.com/subscribe. All right, we got a lot of drama in the NBA. The Charlotte Hornets falling apart. LaMelo Ball asking for a trade. Big game tonight between Houston and Denver. How does it all break down? We'll find out over the next 30 minutes. Jeff Sherman is up first, VP over there of risk management at the Superbook and odds maker for the association. Get his thoughts on the games tonight.
Watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
How about this bit of news? So the Angels, by the way, look, I know it's the baseball offseason. I'm an Angels fan. We could mention this. So the Angels go and acquire Grayson Rodriguez from the Baltimore Orioles the other day. Pretty solid acquisition. I mean, the Angels need arms. You're buying low on Rodriguez, give the injury history, whatever it is. Will Hill, who I don't think likes me very much, sends me this during the commercial break. During a podcast appearance on Foul Territory, Grayson Rodriguez said, that he wasn't required to get a physical before getting traded to the Angels. Yeah, can't have nice things. Clippers are absolutely awful. Angels don't know what they're doing. And now here we are with that. All right, we'll get back to the association. We'll get to the association. Jeff Sherman, VP of Risk Management, is going to join us here momentarily as we get his thoughts on the week that will be, or the day that will be, for the NBA Cup. It is, of course, the bi-weekly. Is it bi-weekly? Second time this week that we have some NBA Cup action today. Games of note in the association. Denver at Houston. Houston, a 2.5-point favorite, total of 236 or 235.5. That's the number over at the Westgate Superbook. So let's start there. Jeff Sherman's with us now. Jeff, you guys are hanging 235.5 on the total, 2.5 in terms of the spread in favor of Houston. What do you make of this clash of titans tonight between the Nuggets and the Rockets?
Yeah, it's this is the group of death in the NBA Cup. So you have everyone in that group is 1-1. Point differential means something here. So this is going to be a great one to watch. I'm looking forward to it. Tough one to wager on, though, especially the way Houston's been playing.
Anything action-wise you guys have had, anything notable here? You guys are 2.5. By the way, you guys always hang -109 on the juice, total of 235.5. Any notable bets on this one that have crossed over so far?
Well, we reached 3 on the Rockets, got some sharp play early, but then that got taken back to 2.5. So right now we're seeing a lot of two-way action on this one. Nothing notable one way.
What do you have from a power rating standpoint? Denver, Houston, I mean, I would assume Oklahoma City, obviously the highest power rated team, but what's the gap between those three teams in the Western Conference in your mind?
Oklahoma City is by far the number one. You can see it reflective in the title odds. Denver, I have number 2, and they're sitting at 11-2 for the title. And I'm at Houston at 10-1 now off of their recent string of performances. So right now I have them third in the pecking order, and the Lakers right behind that, as much as that pains you, but it's pretty much that order in the West at this point.
And I would assume, you correct me if I'm wrong, top 3 in the West is also top 3 overall, is it not? I mean, I would imagine a Eastern Conference team from a power rating standpoint that matches any one of the 3 that we were just talking about, Houston, Denver, OKC, not in that order.
No, you're correct with that. And we just saw the other day, Houston was laying 1.5 at Cleveland.
Yep.
You know, Cleveland, New York are supposed to be the top 2 in the East. So if you have those teams laying points like that, the one thing about the Cavs, it almost looks like, I know they've had a few injuries, but it looks like they're taking the approach of, and the regular season's the preseason, and the seeding isn't going to matter to them. They just need to be healthy, because we saw what happened in the playoffs last year when they weren't healthy and they got bounced. So I think they're taking a bit of a different approach. That's one reason why I like the Pistons for the division this year.
Yeah, how much do you believe, that's a good jumping off point to that topic, how much do we believe in Detroit, where you have them right now in your power ratings? How much did you improve them over the course of this first month of the season, given the strong start? And it looks legitimate statistically at almost every single spot.
Yeah, no, I've improved them about 3 points. And in the East, you know, right behind Cleveland and New York, I think they have staying power. I think they have room to grow. They've been doing some of this without Cade Cunningham recently. So, you know, the youth on that team, and I think that they're going to have the ability to make some trades before the trade deadline to even improve. And they almost remind me of what we saw coming out of Indiana last year, getting to the East the way they did. They could be this year's Indiana.
They could be, and they also have a player like the caliber of Tyrese Halliburton and Cade Cunningham, who's been brilliant to start the year. Jeff Sherman with us. Again, follow him up on X at Golf Odds, going through the association. We're 1 month into the season, some big picture stuff and some game stuff later today. Let me hit on a game, and then we can talk about these teams individually as well. I am very excited for Denver and Houston. I think I might be more excited for Miami and Chicago. The Bulls road trip that they just ended on, absolute insanity with a double overtime loss to Utah, the ridiculous win against against Denver, the even more ridiculous victory against Portland. What have you done with this Bulls team, and have we seen any action here on this game? 2.5 is the number with a total of 250.
Yeah, a small total we got there, huh? But yeah, we opened 2.5, and it's been steady at that, so nothing of note at this point. But Chicago came out of the gates immediately their first few games, so they've had some staying power with what they've been doing. And like you mentioned, a very impressive win in Denver, coming off the double overtime the night before. It was a really bad spot for them. They were come away with a win there. So it looks like they can be a regular season team with staying power this year. I'm not sold on them in the playoffs, even though the East is weak. I think they're going to be one of those better regular season teams. And the Heat, the thing is, every team has had these injuries. We can go up and down the board, and every team is dealing with something somewhere. So, it's going to be a war of attrition this season.
So Miami has been my candidate for a potential dark horse to make a run. And I've been pretty anti-Miami almost every year, Jeff. But the fact that Tyler Hero hasn't seen the floor yet, you have this new offense that Spoelstra's rolling out there. They have actually some real depth here once Hero returns. What do you make of what Miami can be here? And did you improve their power rating? Because they were a team that I did not think was going to be this good, but they look like they have the potential to be one of the better offenses in the NBA, and by extension, maybe one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I've improved them by about 3 points. And, like you mentioned, no Hero yet. Adebayo's missed some time. And you have to give a complete nod to Spoelstra, and he's changed the way that they play the game. And like you mentioned, with the totals and the pace, they're wearing some other teams out with that pace. One thing I remember watching when they played at the Lakers, and I'm watching Vasquez, and he just was like a bull charging towards the rim every play. And then eventually teams would collapse on that and open things up for other shooters. So they're just getting downhill quickly and running with pace, and it's wearing some teams out in the second half.
Yep. Tonight now in the association, we do have a bunch of games that the NBA kept. We do also have 4 favorites of about 13.5 points or more on the board. So it doesn't look like we might have a ton of entertainment tonight. Jeff Sherman with us again, looking through the Friday NBA card and some big picture thoughts. All right, you mentioned your boys. For those who are with us who don't know Jeff, he is a Lakers fan. Skinny Luka has looked absolutely tremendous. They just got LeBron back. I have called them a regular season team, and I think you're right. I think they could be a very good regular season team, but I think there's a pretty firm ceiling between them and the trio of powers, if you will, in the Western Conference. But how much have you improved this team, and what do you think their ceiling is?
Yeah, they've surprised me a bit, and now it's going to be the integration of LeBron. And I know there's been a lot of talk back and forth on how he's going to fit, but to me, he really needs to be the third option on that team and accept that role at this point because of what Luka and Reeves have started with. And, the ceiling point there, we saw him and minus LeBron, but get blown out of Oklahoma City about a week and a half ago. And there's a large gap, and I don't think they're going to be able to overcome that. The only thing is you never know how injuries are going to play out. Oklahoma City's been doing this without the good Jalen Williams. He could come back, somebody else could go down, and we don't know how that's going to shake out. So things can always open up from that perspective, but all teams being healthy, I think they can have a strong regular season. I think they can win the division. They're obviously favored at this point, but I think they'd have a tough go in the Western Conference, especially if they have to play some combination of going through Denver and then Oklahoma City.
All right, last couple of minutes with you. I cannot let you go without asking, because you and I have shared thoughts quite a bit. We exchange messages from time to time, and I think we have shared a similar affinity with the Philadelphia 76ers in years past. Jeff, I don't know, man. This might be it. They've got a bunch of good guards. We have yet to see Embiid consistently. Paul George is back. Big win on the road against Milwaukee yesterday. Am I barking up the wrong tree? They're 8-1 to win the East in some spots. I got them at 18-1. I'm feeling pretty good about this.
Well, I was higher on them before the season, what the prospects were showing, but I think the Embiid issue is going to be long-term, and I don't think he's ever going to be right, even when we get to the playoffs. And they do have some other nice pieces, and what Maxi's doing is incredible. I like integrating George back in the lineup, but I don't think Embiid's going to be someone that you can count on at all, and it's going to be a tough go for that. So I remember what we saw against the Knicks last year, and it's tough for them to overcome things. So I'm a little bit less optimistic at this point in the season than I was with what they had going into the season, hoping that Embiid would be playing more than he is.
Follow him up on X at Golf Odds, VP Risk Management, NBA Odds Maker, Golf Odds Maker as well. Jeff Sherman. Jeff, good to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving, man.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, JBT.
Again, Jeff Sherman, thankful for his time here on the program today. The 76ers, I refuse to give up. I refuse to give up on a team that has looked pretty impressive. And I texted this to Mitch yesterday because we were talking about it, and I'm sure he'll bring it up today. It's going to irritate me, I can tell by the time we get to the end of the year here, why Tyrese Maxey, cannot win this award in terms of MVP. He has been absolutely incredible with what he's been able to do, and yet he's probably not going to be able to break through. Now, Nikola Jokic has been great, but Tyrese Maxey, again, last night, 52 points. Dude's been insane. All right, we'll take a break. Let's get a little bit more granular. Let's get some best bets in the association with Zach Cohen when we return.
Watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
All right, we have no time to waste, none whatsoever. Zach Cohen is nice enough to give us some time here today, senior editor up at VSiN.com and host, not co-host, nothing like that. He is the host of Hardwood Handicappers, out now every single day in your feed. It has returned. Zach, it is good to talk to you. I know the trouble that you're going through right now as a father, so we appreciate a couple of minutes. I, too, have been in that position before, but let's not waste any time. So we have a big one tonight, and I will not, by the way, this is going to be news for Justin. I have added a best bet. I'm sorry. I think I told you this. I can't remember. Alperen Şengün tonight. Love the analysis, so give it to us. What do we have in store? And you can zoom out. You can give us the whole breakdown here for Rockets and Nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, I have Şengün to go over 23.5 points. That should be around minus 104. If you have to pay a worse price for it, I'd still do it. Şengün has been on a heater lately. I think he scored 25 plus in 3 straight games. And, the acquisition of Kevin Durant hasn't done anything to his workload. Like, they are still pounding the ball inside, giving him an opportunity to make plays. And I think this is a matchup that's really favorable for him. I mean, he had a really bad 3 games against the Nuggets last year, averaged 17 points per game or something right around there. But he did kind of dominate Joker when they played at the Eurobasket over the summer. He had 28 points, 13 rebounds in that game, helped Turkey upset Serbia, who I thought was the best team in the competition. And I just think that we're going to see a lot of that again here, because even in the worst case scenario, giving the ball to Şengün a lot will at least tire Joker out if he is the one, primarily guarding him. I think that there might be some stuff where Denver tries to switch Gordon onto him, but not sure that matchup works. Gordon is very good at defending up, but not sure he could do it against one of the better post scorers in the league. So I think Şengün ends up, having a really big game. And I do think the Rockets are the lean for me in this game. If I were to take a side or a total, that would be the way I'd go, is I'd probably lay the points at the Rockets. I just think that Houston has been very, very good at home under Ime Udoka since he took over there. And I do think Denver missing Christian Braun is big in a game against a very good defensive Rockets team.
So I'll ask it this way, because I've just, and I think a lot of people have, just run with the, you know what? Number one, Oklahoma City. Number two, Denver. Am I making the mistake? And I'm not dismissing Houston, because we've talked about this. I think we talked about this yesterday on Harvard Handicappers, where the floor is so high for Houston because of how well they play defensively. But because of that, am I maybe dismissing Houston too easily? Could they actually be better than Denver in the big picture?
Yeah, I think that this is definitely a Western Conference contender. I think that we've seen enough now out of Reed Shepherd and Ahmed Thompson that, the point guard spot that was a little bit questionable after the injury to Fred VanVleet. I mean, tore his ACL. I think a lot of people wrote them off as contenders once that happened. But Shepherd's taken a big leap forward. Thompson's been great. I think they're getting good enough play at the point. And we haven't even seen Dorian Finney-Smith yet. That's a player that we know is going to be able to contribute in the playoffs. He had a very good series last year, in that Lakers Timberwolves series. Like, he's one of the few players on the court that, you can rely on. I think that his game's going to translate very well. And this has been a Houston team that's been shooting very well this season. And Finney-Smith only adds to that. I think he's the best corner 3-point shooter in the entire NBA. So once he's healthy, I think that only helps.
All right. The other day, we shared a text message, and I shared that text message here. If not now, when? That was for the Indiana Pacers against the Charlotte Hornets. They got off the schneid, snapped the losing streak, snapped the cover streak. Are we going back to the well with Indiana tonight against Cleveland?
I have Indiana to cover. It's not an if not now when for them to win, but it's an if not now when for them to cover. Yeah, 14.5 points. I think that that's a ton. I think that Indiana, now that Benedict Mathurin is back, is going to be a lot more competitive over the next couple of weeks. And I think they might be a really profitable team in the near future, just because you see the 2-13 record attached. I wrote this at VSiN.com. If it sounds like you're hearing it again, you are probably hearing it again. But this is a team that I think a lot of people are going to be quick to kind of dismiss, because the bad record, the Halliburton injury, those two kind of go hand in hand to a very casual observer. But I do think that the Mathurin injury really hurt them more than anything. And I think that him coming back gives them kind of a dynamic offense again. At least, look at the backcourt, like Nembhard and Mathurin. That's as good as you can get outside of like superstars. And then Siakam is an all-star. The rotation is pretty deep with contributors, and Cleveland has been a little shaky, I think, on both ends of the floor. And Mobley has been a little bit disappointing as a rim protector. So I think the Pacers keep this somewhat close.
I'm with you. I think I kind of find myself wanting to kind of back Indiana now that they're a little bit healthier. I mean, again, they're three big names. We're talking about Halliburton, Turner, and Nesmith really out of this rotation. The rest of these guys from last year's finals run are now back, and they're healthy and ready to contribute for this team, and they're still very well coached. And you've hit all the notes here with Cleveland's injuries. All right, it is a card that is deep, but it's also got a lot of big favorites. Cleveland's one of them. Boston is one of them, taking on the Nets. This is part of a little baseball set, I believe, between these two. What do we make of the Celtics laying about 14.5 with a total floating around 222, 222.5?
Yeah, I laid 14.5 with Boston. I know I told you on the podcast the other day, I don't really like to mess with these massive spreads, but I think it's a little bit different when you're talking about the NBA Cup, and the Celtics are a team that can really use a big win by margin. And they are a 3-point shooting team going against a defense that is absolutely terrible at defending the three. Only one team in the league is doing worse than the Nets in terms of 3-point percentage for opponents. We know that the Celtics are going to fire them away. So I think Boston's going to be knocking them down playing at home. And I don't think the Celtics are going to be, shy about trying to run up this score, because like I said, they can really use a win by 20 plus, given what we've already seen in the group. And I think that this is a game where you might want to look into alternate spreads, because I think that, while we've seen this mostly in the final games of group play, I think these teams know when they have opportunities to really bury teams. And I think that's one of those opportunities tonight.
Again, with us, Zach Cohen. Make sure you check out Harvard Handicappers. He is hosting that. Harvard Handicappers is back wherever you get your podcasts, and VSiN.com with plenty of write-ups. NBA, college hoops, everything in between, every single sport, Zach will write it up for you. When does tennis season start? I assume that's not underway, correct?
It's like late December. I'm kind of taking a little off season. There is some stuff going on right now. There's Davis Cup and some challenger events, and I do usually handicap challengers, but I'm giving myself like 3 weeks for holiday season to just kind of rest up for the Australian stuff.
How can I forget the Davis Cup? I apologize. Not to belittle your favorite sport. I apologize. It was just a joke. I know you don't like it when Matt Humans does that all the time. Second favorite sport. I apologize. I don't want to be a curmudgeon like Matt Humans or Tim Murray. All right, let's go to some other sports here, or some other spots. Bulls and Heat. So you and I were going to be head-to-head here. I didn't play anything because really my feel was, man, this has to be kind of a tough spot, right? Boston has this wild road trip. Now they come back home to take on a Heat team that is slowly getting a bit healthier outside of Tyler Hero, playing some good basketball offensively. The Bulls are 2.5-point favorites. The total is as high as 250.5. What are you doing here?
Yeah, I mean, the total is absolutely insane. And probably if I were taking something, I'd probably have to go over on the total. But my play in this game is I took the Bulls -2. I'd be willing to take the 2.5. I'd probably be willing to go 3.5 just because the nature of the NBA Cup. But it is a game where I think that I was kind of with you when we were talking about it. Like, it is a terrible spot for Chicago in terms of coming off the big road trip. But at the same time, like, Miami is going to be without Wiggins, without Jovic. There is no Hero until I believe next Monday. He is going to be back soon. But I just think it's the team. It's a little shorthanded, and the Bulls have been a little bit stronger than the Heat, especially when you're looking at home net rating versus Heat road net rating. And I do think that the types of shots we've seen out of Miami throughout the course of this season, they've really revamped the offense. They've been getting a lot of corner threes, a lot of good looks in the short mid-range area, kind of like playing to Bam's strengths a little bit. That is a spot on the court, including the corners, that the Chicago Bulls really defend well. I think that Billy Donovan's done a good job of kind of tailoring a defense to a team that's not very great defensively in terms of looking at the players. And I just think the Bulls are going to be kind of ready for what the Heat want to do. And I think Chicago's slightly better offensively. I'm just hoping we see Kobe White in this game, because I did take the over on his made threes at 2.5, and I also sprinkled the over on 3.5. He's questionable tonight because I think they're going to choose between this game and the Wizards game. They're not going to play him in 2 back-to-back games, so I'm hoping that they choose tonight. Hopefully they will. I mean, it is the right choice in my opinion.
I was going to say, not only is it a NBA Cup, but you're also directly in the standings with Miami. You're probably going to be competing them for a seed at some point. So I would assume you want everybody, all hands on deck. All right, Minnesota and Phoenix. Your Suns are 4.5-point underdogs at home. Totals 232.5. How did you decide to play this game?
I bought up to 5.5 and probably got a way worse price than I could have gotten if I waited till this moved to 4.5. But I do think that Phoenix is the right side in this game. I think that the Suns have been a top 10 team in terms of offensive rebounding this season. Timberwolves are bottom 5 in terms of opponents' offensive rebound percentage. They've done a really poor job of keeping opponents off the glass. And Minnesota is a team that right now, I wrote this at VSiN.com, they're kind of playing Anthony Edwards as a primary point guard right now. They're really kind of giving up on Mike Conley being the answer at the 1. I don't think that they believe in Rob Dillingham anymore. That seems pretty clear at this point. And Edwards is a great scorer, but he's probably going to have to take some licks before he's really comfortable running the offense. And the Suns have been turning opponents over a lot. So I think Phoenix playing at home, where they have a really strong net rating, I believe it's plus 12.6, kind of right in the range of where like the Thunder and Nuggets are over the course of the entire season. 6-2 at home, really strong net rating. I think that Phoenix is a really good play to keep this game close and possibly win outright.
All right, buddy, we appreciate it. Get back to being a father. Thank you very much. You can find the work, Harvard Handicappers, at VSiN.com. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Ready to boost your bankroll? Bracco's giving new depositors a 50% purchase bonus. Just use promo code VSiN when you sign up. Bracco's lines are live on our VSiN Betting Splits page. See where the action is moving before you bet. Turn your bonus into an edge with insight that matters. Go to playbracco.com today and use the promo code VSiN. That's VSIN. All right, we wrap. When we come back, we'll have best bets for the weekend, football and college. Got a couple in college that you really like, and market's moving against me in a few of these, so it's one of those, hey, what am I missing specials. Well, guess what? Last night there was a what am I missing special, and the Hawks went out to San Antonio and lost that game. So hopefully the result is not the same for me this weekend in college football. I'll tell you what that side is and all the sides I've got coming up next.
Watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
A big thank you to all of our guests who joined us. If you missed out, we had all the great and smart folks with us here today. You can go wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Pods, or VSiN.com. Check out how you missed it. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe as well. We would very much appreciate it. Just search Money Moves wherever you get your podcast and check out what Mike Palm had to say. Palm had some great thoughts. We didn't even get to cover everything with Mike as a member of the AGA and some of the news that came down this week. Will Hill, Jason Jarvis, who's now in first place in the Circa Friday Football Invitational, as well as Jeff Sherman, Zach Cohen, and others. Go to VSiN.com or wherever you get your pods and download Money Moves today, as well as Pod of the Futures and Hardwood Handicappers and Should Have Bet More and just all of the pods under the VSiN umbrella. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, best bets as we head into the weekend. A recap from last night. You know, this is what you get when you blindly just bet something because of the situation and with no preparation in any way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, I brought Bonatoni down with me. USC minus 18.5, a blemish from last night. But Texans get it done as a 6-point underdog. Hawks on the money line at minus 102 end up losing out there at San Antonio. They're actually getting smoked. And then they had this furious comeback, somewhat fake though, end up losing by double digits. 76ers is a 2-point favorite, get it done. And Ryan Rollins over 27.5 points and assists gets it done last night in the association. So up for the evening. We'll see if we can keep this thing going for the weekend. You see all the results there. Yeah, the second I was watching that USC-Troy game, I was like, man, we probably should have done this. There was literally no logic behind it other than, Troy played a double overtime game. They can't do it again, can they? They indeed did just that. Played a double overtime game once again and lost in ridiculous fashion. So 3-2 night. Let's head to the National Football League, the bets this weekend and what we have going. First off, Steelers plus 2.5 this week against the Chicago Bears. It does look like maybe we're trending toward Aaron Rodgers potentially playing this weekend. But I will continue to kind of pound the desk here. The Bears do have all the signs of a team that is potentially set for a fall from grace. 7-3 with a negative 6-point differential, a turnover margin that is greatly in their favor. These are all kind of signs of a team that is probably worth playing against. And I just don't think that there's this gap, even though there's really not that much according to the line here. I mean, look, that would tell you that they're about a point better than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just don't think that's the case. I think these two teams are really equal to each other. You talk about 1.5 being worth home field. Again, probably should just be more like 1.5 here instead of 2.5. It's not the biggest edge in the world. I will say it's a good edge for you if you find somewhere, again, that are offering teasers that are palatable to you. I think the Steelers are probably going to be one of the stronger teaser legs out there among some others, but do like the Steelers in this spot. Did use them in a teaser. We'll get to that a little bit later. But Steelers plus 2.5 against Chicago, live to get the outright win here. This one I'll probably regret. I mean, I obviously already do. I took Bengals plus 6. This is now up to 7 because I figured I was going to get ahead of this and try to say, hey, looks like Joe Burrow is going to play. And it makes all the sense in the world that you would try to get him out here for this weekend against the New England Patriots, considering your margin of error, which is nothing, that one small, to get back into the race for the AFC North. And instead, it sounds like today that we are heading more in the direction of Joe Burrow sitting one more week and then going back to him maybe next week against Baltimore, or the next week or next game, I guess, against Baltimore. I don't know. I don't understand that strategy. I understand the importance of the game against Baltimore, but I also understand the importance of an AFC foe in the New England Patriots and would think that you're going to give it a crack here. Ultimately not the case. Now, I will say this. I'm not going to get the best of the number here. It's back up to 7. Probably even going to close like 7.5. But we did talk about this at the beginning of the week, which was I have been wanting to take some shots here against New England. Joe Flacco minus Jamar Chase, probably not the best situation to be in, but I do think the Bengals have enough to potentially be a little bit more frisky than what we're giving them credit for. Again, not the best position to be in. Don't love it, but still, of course, bet it. So we're going Bengals plus 6. Colts plus 3.5 against the Kansas City Chiefs. This is an addition at the beginning of the week. Not the best after the news yesterday for those who had missed it. Daniel Jones got added to the injury report, was a limited participant in practice with a calf injury. Now, there are some reporters out in Indianapolis that are telling us that this was just precautionary, that they don't think that there's any limitations, that he's going to be fine. We will see if that is the case. Quarterback situation pretty thin for Indy behind Daniel Jones and even Daniel Jones himself. We talked about this earlier this week. Again, Money Moves, wherever you get your podcast. Over the last 2 games, Daniel Jones has committed 9 turnover-worthy plays. He has been putting the ball in danger and very much reverted back to old Daniel Jones. Whether that is because of the last 2 opponents, being the Steelers and the Falcons, 2 teams that can rush the passer, generate pressure. Maybe that is something that is just because of the opponents they faced. Obviously, another weird game in Germany. But either way, Daniel Jones over the last 2 weeks has looked way different than the Daniel Jones that started the year. And that is a somewhat troubling sign here, coupled with the calf injury. So Colts plus 3.5. Browns and Raiders under 36.5. This is about 36 across board. A couple of 36.5s out there as well. But we'll go with the low-hanging fruit here. Two bad offensive lines. Shedeur Sanders getting the start for Cleveland. Geno Smith and the Raiders, not great news for me here. Also, again, another thing that happens post-play, which is that Max Crosby pops up on an injury report as well. He is limited in practice due to a knee injury, hoping that he's going to be out there for the Raiders, obviously, with the ability to get after Shedeur Sanders and create a ton of pressure and disrupt this offense. But under 36.5, these low totals, they can get under. We've also seen them go way over. That's a really good analysis. Either way, though, I think this could be a pretty ugly game with a lot of poor quarterback play, given the level of defense you're facing for each of the other signal callers and the fact that these offensive lines have been poor. Two teasers for you as well. We'll hop into the Stormy Buonantony Bowl on Monday night. Falcons +8 and 49ers -1 as a 6-point teaser. I also, by the time we get to kickoff on Sunday, I think I'm going to add the Falcons as well here. I just don't know if I buy them being 2-point underdogs to New Orleans. I understand where we're at with London. I understand that Kirk Cousins is getting the start. Having said that, we're saying right now that Tyler Shuck and the Saints are a better team than the Atlanta Falcons, given where this team was at just a couple of weeks ago. I just can't really buy that, but it is a strong teaser leg, I think. So teasing that up to 8, teasing the 49ers down to 1. The other teaser as well, Steelers +8.5. And the Falcons, this was early in the week, 7.5. Once I got back up to 2, decided to jump back in on the Falcons. So kind of flying with the fact that, hey, I do think the Falcons are being a little undervalued. At the very least, worth adding and getting through a couple of key numbers. So please, Atlanta, don't let me down. By the way, I will say this. The last time I have used the Atlanta Falcons in a teaser leg, they did blow it up. So I would not appreciate if they did that again. All right, let's go to college football. Trio of plays here in the CFB, one of which has moved against me in the betting market. San Jose State +12.5 against San Diego State this weekend. We've talked about this game quite a bit. Do like the fact that I am getting a team that can throw a forward pass against the San Diego State team that has shown some trouble defensively against any passing offense with a pulse. I know San Jose State is in rough shape, has not met any of the expectations that were set on the program prior to the season. But I want to play against San Diego State with some of these teams that can actually throw the ball around the yard. And I think San Jose State can do just that against SDSU. Some spots have moved off this 12.5. Circa, for example, where we sit right now, down to 11.5. So I think the Spartans will be live to stay inside of that number. Also, USC catching 10 against Oregon. This one will probably regret, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I've heard a lot of people make the case for USC. You never really like that a ton. And in fact, as I say that, there's a bunch of 10.5s out there, despite the fact that you lick your finger, you test the wind, and you say, oh, there's a lot of support out there for the USC Trojans. Market is moving against that theory, but still, I will go ahead and make the case that they can stay inside of this number. I understand the struggles for USC and Big Ten play on the road. This is not a Big Ten road trip. Yes, they, of course, are part of the conference, but the Trojans are not making a weird Midwest trek. They are just going up the coast to take on Oregon. I think this team has the capabilities on offense to stay inside of a big number against an Oregon team that really we haven't seen tested quite much, and I do think USC is going to do just that. And last but not least, this one's also moved against me a little bit here. I'm going to try it. Air Force +3.5 against New Mexico. I think it's a tricky spot. Coming off of a tough win against Colorado State, you turn the ball over a bunch. Now you have to get ready in a week to take on Air Force, get ready for the option. It's not the best position to be in if you're New Mexico. Air Force opened up as a 1.5 point favorite. We have now flipped to 3.5, and I mentioned the market moving against me. Some spots are up to 4 in favor of New Mexico on the road. That would include Circa here. So it didn't get the best of the number. If you do like Air Force, look around because you can get that 4 there in college football. And then last but not least, in the association, did add this at the last second. We'll go with our boy, Zach Cohen, and our other boy, Alperen Şengün, over the 24.5 points tonight at -110 against Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. Do like that Şengün is going to be in the spot. The analysis, I think, is spot on, too. You know, there's not that many times where you're going to be able to get physical with Nikola Jokic with a talent that is going to make him work on defense as much as Şengün is. And I do think Şengün, a.k.a. Baby Jokic, is going to take it somewhat seriously when you're talking about that matchup against him. So quick recap again. Steelers +2.5, Bengals +6, Colts +3.5, Browns and Raiders under 36.5, Falcons 49ers teaser, Steelers Falcons teaser, in college football, San Jose State +12.5, USC +10, Air Force +3.5, and Şengün over 24.5 points. All right. Coming up next, folks, we've got Follow the Money. It's going to be a good week. It is a Friday, so the boys will get you ready for the football weekend. Remember, we, Follow the Money, and myself, Stormy Bonatoni, will be on Sundays. It's the Friday Football Invitational getting started at 7 Eastern, and then the Sports Gambling Podcast Bros will take you from there starting at 10 p.m. Please remember 2 things. Like, rate, review, subscribe, podcast review. Get them money moves to be fantastic. And make sure you join us on Sunday morning starting at 9 a.m. Pacific for Countdown to Kickoff as we get you ready in the last 60 minutes leading up to kickoff of those 1 p.m. Eastern games. We'd very much appreciate it. We'll see you then. Stay tuned. Follow the Money coming up next.